In 787 AD, Viking warriors took to the seas to reach England and avenge their leader. What led to this spat, and what was the fate of these warriors? This is the story of the Great Heathen Army. In 787 AD, 3 Viking ships from Denmark arrived at the coast of England. At the time, King Bertric was married to Eadburga, the daughter of another king named Offa. When these unexpected visitors showed up, King Bertric sent a reeve, a local official, to talk with them and guide them to the nearest royal town. Unfortunately, this meeting ended in a very bad way. The Vikings killed the reeve, and this marked the first Viking raid on England. The Viking attacks continued off and on until the 860s, when they changed their strategy. They stopped the random raids and instead sent a huge army to invade England. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle called this huge army the Great Heathen Army. This change started the new phase of more organized and deliberate warfare. In AD 865, the Great Heathen Army launched a major invasion of England. The Vikings had a history of targeting rich places like monasteries, but now they wanted more. They aimed to take over the 4 mighty Anglo-Saxon kingdoms: East Anglia, Northumbria, Mercia, and Wessex. But how did this army really come to be? There's a story that this huge army came together to avenge the death of a legendary Viking hero, Ragnar Lodbrok, who was killed by King Aelle of Northumbria. Motivated by revenge, the Great Heathen Army's invasion marked a significant and fierce chapter in Viking history. The Anglo-Saxon stories don't clearly say why the Great Heathen Army invaded England, but the tale of Ragnar Lodbrok's sons trying to avenge their father shows that the invasion was driven by a desire for revenge. Ragnar Lodbrok was a legendary Viking leader who once raided Northumbria during King Aelle's rule. Ragnar was defeated, captured, and met a sad fate. King Aelle had him thrown into a pit filled with venomous snakes. When Ragnar's son, Inware, also known as Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Hubba, or Ube, heard about their father's sad end, they were seriously angry. They led a Viking force to England, captured King Aelle, and allegedly killed him using a brutal method called the Blood Eagle, where the victim's ribs are cut from the spine and the lungs are pulled out. Now that is seriously crazy. This quest for revenge led to the formation of the Great Heathen Army. Upon arriving in England, their first stop was East Anglia. There they struck a deal with the local king, who gave them horses in exchange for peace. After securing this agreement, the army spent the winter of 865 to 866 in Thetford before moving on to capture York. After their initial success in East Anglia, the Great Heathen Army continued their march northward and seized control of Northumbria, including its capital, York. They defeated both the recently removed king, Osbert, and the man who took his place, Aelle of Northumbria. Following these victories, the Vikings put a puppet ruler named Ecbert I on the Northumbrian throne, and his role was to collect taxes from the people to fund further Viking attacks. With their stronghold in the north now secure, the Vikings' army pushed further into England, heading toward the kingdom of Mercia. They spent the winter near what is now Nottingham. During this time, there was several battles between the Vikings and a combined army from Mercia and Wessex. Ultimately, the leaders of Mercia decided to negotiate and agreed to pay the Vikings a large sum of money, known as Danegeld, to prevent further Viking raids on their lands. Satisfied with the agreement, the Great Heathen Army then retreated back north. But were they really satisfied? In AD 869, after a period of movement and conquests, the army returned to the kingdom of East Anglia and settled for the winter in Thetford. During this stay, they confronted King Edward, who would eventually be honored as Edmund the Martyr. King Edmund fought against them, but the Danish took the victory, killed the king, and conquered all the land. After their victory, they settled into Thetford, marking yet another strategic point in their ongoing campaign across England. In AD 871, a new group called the Great Summer Army arrived from Scandinavia, boosting the Vikings' strength and shifting their focus to the Kingdom of Wessex. After a few smaller raids, this mighty Viking force fought against the armies of Wessex, led by King Ethelred and his brave younger brother, who would later become known as King Alfred the Great. In a dramatic turn of events, the Vikings were beaten badly and forced to flee, with many of their warriors falling during their run. Just 3 months after this defeat, King Ethelred passed away, and Alfred became the king. To keep the peace momentarily and get ready for more Viking threats, Alfred agreed to pay a Danegeld as a sort of ransom. Despite this treaty, peace didn't last long. The Vikings didn't stay quiet for long. They moved to London to spend the winter of 871 to 872. By the next campaigning season, they had regrouped in York and brought in more warriors. After a mission in northeastern Mercia, they settled for the winter near Torksey. The following year was busy with more invasions into Mercia. By AD 874, they managed to push King Burgred of Mercia into exile and took over his kingdom, leaving Wessex as the last standing opponent. They spent that winter in Repton on the Middle Trent River, and afterward, the Great Heathen Army seemed to split up. One group returned to Northumbria to settle down, while the other group prepared to take on Wessex again. Still eager for riches, the Vikings resumed their raids in other parts of Wessex. At first, they were successful, putting Alfred's kingdom in danger. But Alfred wasn't one to give up easily. He gathered his people, readying them to defend their homes. The fierce Battle of Edington in 878 was a turning point. There, Alfred's relentless courage met the Viking fury. Against the odds, Alfred won a decisive victory, dealing a harsh blow to the Viking invaders and securing peace for his kingdom. This major victory led to a peace agreement known as the Treaty of Wedmore. In this treaty, Guthrum, the Viking leader, agreed to be baptized as a Christian and to take his forces out of Wessex. Later, a formal agreement called the Treaty of Alfred and Guthrum was also signed, which outlined the borders between Alfred's lands and Guthrum's territories, and set up rules for peaceful trade. Initially, the Vikings came with big plans, but they soon ran into the solid wall of Alfred's strategic defenses. The turning point came with the Battle of Edington, which led to a significant victory for Alfred. Understanding the importance of a battle at sea against the Vikings, King Alfred took a groundbreaking step by boosting his naval power. He ordered the construction of advanced ships that were longer than those of the Vikings. This new fleet gave Wessex a key advantage on the water. Alongside his naval initiatives, Alfred made major reforms to his army and defense strategies. He established a network of fortified towns known as burhs, which were strongholds against Viking raids. These burhs not only provided protection, but also served as safe havens for the people living nearby. Whenever a threat appeared, residents could quickly find safety within the walls of the nearest burh. These reforms made Alfred's realm much more secure and better prepared to face future Viking attacks. King Alfred's smart reforms and strong defense strategies were key in stopping the Vikings from their usual tactic of capturing fortified centers to use as bases for their raids. Starting in 884, these changes began to seriously limit Viking raids in Wessex, weakening their grip on the region. By 896, the Viking attacks were not paying off like before, leading the Viking forces to scatter. They looked for new opportunities in East Anglia and Northumbria, while others, running low on resources, took to the sea and eventually settled in the Seine region. Despite facing multiple Viking threats over the years, Alfred defended his kingdom successfully. His efforts led to the eventual dispersal of Viking armies to East Anglia and Northumbria. This set the boundaries between the Viking-controlled Danelaw and Alfred's enduring reign in Wessex. You've heard it twice now, and might be wondering, what exactly is the Danelaw? After the Danes raided and took much of England's wealth, there wasn't much left. They ended up settling in a large part of conquered England, and this area became known as the Danelaw. It was called this because it was the part of England where Danish laws and customs ruled, not English ones. At this time, England was split into three parts: Wessex, English Mercia, and the Danelaw. The Danelaw wasn't just a Danish area, it was a blend of the local English people and the Vikings from the Great Army who decided to make it their home. As a result, many of the names of the places in this region are of Danish origin, reflecting the mixed heritage of the area. So, the Danelaw became a unique place where two cultures merged, shaping the history and landscape of England.